Hello, hello, and welcome to the show. So last night I had the privilege of having a really informative and interesting conversation with Steve Van Metre, a real gentleman and well-respected man in the realm of macroeconomics. It's incredibly important to get highly attuned to what's going on in terms of the economy and the landscape at the moment for the ordinary person who probably doesn't know all that much more than what we're being fed in the news effectively. So I purposely asked Steve to come on the show to give people a real high level overview of the different important issues which face us now and are going to increasingly be facing us over the coming months and potentially years. So we were touching on different things like interest rates, inflation, housing markets, equity markets, pensions, and other things. So grab a cup of coffee, subscribe to the show if you get value from it, and share it with friends and family. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, folks. So today I have the privilege of having Steve Van Metre as my guest, macro fund manager and inventor of the Portfolio Shield investment strategy. Steve's a regular contributor to Real Vision Finance. He has his own YouTube channel with 46,000 subscribers now and self-professed Bond King. So more titles than Apollo Creed there in the Rocky movies, I think. But Steve, how's things? Thanks very much for joining us today.
Hi, Luke. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So, Steve, I suppose just for yourself and for any new viewers or listeners today, just to give you a bit of a background on my channel, it's all about making narrow path choices in life and trying to steer people away from temptation in different ways, which may lead them into making poor decisions. Primarily, we're going to be focusing on faith, financial education, and things that relate to health. So obviously today we're going to be looking at the financial education side of things as a primary. So basically, I want to just paint a quick picture for you, Steve. The average Jane or Joe probably today who may or may not be familiar with Steve Van Metre or George Gammon or Jeff Snider or Peter Schiff, Mike Maloney, Lynette Zhang, all these different macroeconomic kind of experts that are over the last few years, there's been a real increase in terms of popularity on YouTube. And just while people try and figure out these crazy markets, the average person typically gets their information basically from the news and different mainstream media news sources like this. And in terms of the economy, what I see at the moment is people have they have an understanding that we're in a situation where interest rates are in and around 0%. So if you have money sitting in the bank, you know that as inflation is higher than interest rates are, you know that you're actively losing wealth while that money's sitting in the bank. So it's encouraging ordinary people into more risky plays, even if it's something as simple as getting more involved with housing markets or equity markets, stocks and shares. Increasingly now people are starting to FOMO into cryptocurrency markets and things like this. And we're at a stage now where the data shows that retail investors, i.e. ordinary people, are getting more heavily involved in these markets than ever before, while arguably institutional investors like larger banks are starting to exit these markets. So I suppose, what are your thoughts in terms of where we lie at the moment in the sense that, is it a good strategy for the ordinary people to be getting heavily involved in things like ETFs and managed funds and stocks and shares equities at the moment?
Well, I'll say, look, I think it's great that people are getting interested because something that a lot of people over the years, they haven't. The problem is that it's the timing. I think we talked about that before the show. It's always the timing of their interest. And when do people get most interested? Is when prices are really high. And when are people not interested? When they should be, when prices are really low. I mean, no one wants to buy real estate when it's low, but they should. No one wants to buy stocks when they're low, but they should. Instead, we get this mania, and the higher prices go, the more it feeds into it. And it's no different, if anyone's ever been to a casino, if no one's winning and you're walking through the slot machines, it can be kind of depressing. But when someone starts hitting, you hear ding, 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 and all of a sudden everyone's looking like, oh, hey, I want to go over there. I want to sit near them. I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
But probably the best way to win is to find a machine that hasn't, if you could find out, hey, this machine hasn't paid out in a week. Well, I want to play that one, not the one that's been paying out, for the last hour. And I think that's, what I see in the markets is it just all comes down to timing. Because if you're buying at the top, thinking it's going to go higher, which it can, and it has been, at some point, it's going to reverse. And I think we all know that. The problem is no one ever rings a bell at the top. You'll always say, "Oh, I'll get out when the time is right. I'll know when to sell." They never do. In fact, when you see a big correction like we saw last March, that actually scared a lot of professional money managers. But retail, buy, buy, buy. And they don't understand that when we eventually do get this big bear market, it will come down. People will try to buy the dip, it'll rally, and then it'll go down again, and they'll buy again, and it'll go up, and it'll just be like a shredder of their money. And instead of being in a position to buy at a bottom and really change their financial future, because I think that's what's really important. And I know you're trying to do with your show is get people on a path of where their financial future is changing. How do you do that? Well, you stop buying homes at the peak. You stop buying cars at the peak. You stop investing at the peak, and you have to break that cycle. And it's hard because, we're all we used to go out and maybe have a beer with our friends and then, oh, I'm getting so rich in, stocks, real estate, SPACs, crypto, whatever. And you're there going like, oh, I'm just piling up my cash like an idiot. Mm-hmm. But it's that idiot who has the opportunity to buy at the bottom that looks like a genius in the decades that follow.
Yeah, I totally get it. But I suppose then the difficulty is hindsight's always 2020 whenever it comes to saying that, oh, that's where the bottom was, or this is where the top lies. But at the moment, people are being fed so much of a narrative that we're getting further stimulus, as we saw, say, whenever things did fall by 30% across most equity markets in March 2020, for example. And in that scenario, they fell, but also Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency markets took a nosedive. So did gold markets and silver markets, which are allegedly meant to be a store of value, which in theory should have an inverse relationship to these markets in that period, But yeah, in that scenario last year, for example, the Fed stepped in, central banks stepped in all around the world, started engaging in QE, different forms of stimulus, and things moved higher. So now ordinary people kind of have this notion that it's okay. Things are just gonna, the levers are infinite in terms of these central banks. And if things do take a nosedive temporarily, more and more stimulus and monetary and fiscal policy will be able to be, introduced to push things up further. So what would you have to say on that?
Yeah, well, that's what's interesting is QE is a false god. And, March, we had this big correction, but yet, does anybody remember that the Fed restarted QE in October of 2019? Because they did. And so how is it we had a market crash when there was QE going on? Well, maybe it was, Luke, that we just didn't have enough, right? Maybe that was a problem. There just wasn't enough QE. And so what happened is when the market went down and the Fed says, okay, we're going to do some more QE, which I'm sure you're aware, this is just a swap in reserves. All they're doing is changing the nature of a commercial bank's reserves. But everyone now has this belief that the Fed has some magic wand that somehow makes asset prices rise. I don't understand that because there's no part of the quantitative easing process that actually causes a stock to rise. There's no stock purchase, there's no index purchase, there's nothing of the sort going on, but yet there's a belief by investors, and that belief is what brought them to buy. Now they think the Fed has something to do with it. It had nothing to do with it. The Fed just gave them the confidence that perhaps we can do something that we really can't. And in fact, it wasn't the Fed that even said anything. It was Wall Street and other experts that said, look, the Fed's easing. That makes stock prices go up. And then everyone came in and threw their money at it. So the more the Fed is doing, the more people want to throw their money in stocks because they believe in the Fed. And really, it's just a false god. And at some point, that will be the problem is stock prices will come down despite the fact the Fed is doing QE and people won't understand it.
Yeah. And do you have any sort of inclination as to, what could be the trigger to move things in a different direction or when that could potentially arise?
Well, Luke, if I knew
I know it's not financial advice, by the way, it's just pure hypothetical.
Yeah, if I knew that, I'd be rich, and you probably want to know too, so you could be rich with me, and of course, all your viewers would be rich as well because we just.
I'm sure you have a few little subtle ideas though in your own mind.
Yeah, I two things I'm really watching right now are 2-year Treasury yields. I think if 2-year Treasury yields break below 0.1% and they're hovering just over it, now what you'll see is the entire probably twos, maybe even threes, and shorter go negative. And if you wake up one day and they are crashing negative, that will be a massive risk off event. The other factor I'm looking at, which you mentioned earlier, is that the gold sold off. Well, gold and gold mine stocks are a proxy of liquidity, so it was really no surprise that in March they did sell off. They generally, specifically the gold miners, I look at more than the actual metal, because miners tend to lead the metal in price movements, is when you see gold mine stock break out of a topping pattern and head strongly lower, it leads the broad equity market lower. And by the same token, when you see mining stocks in bottom, look forward 6 months and you'll probably see an equity market bottom. So really, even though I'm a self-anointed bond king, and I do wish bond prices were, of course, going higher, as I hope every day they do, the two things I'm looking at is a breakdown in the front end of the treasury curve, because if it breaks apart, then the long end is going to collapse right now with it. And if that doesn't happen first, then I'm looking at, say, the GDX or large gold miners, them breaking out of their big topping pattern, because when they break down, that means liquidity in the financial system is drying up, which is odd considering everyone thinks QE creates liquidity. And that brings risk assets down and causes bond prices to go straight up.
Okay. So I suppose for the ordinary person who wouldn't be trading day in, day out type thing, they may be sitting in a scenario where they have some form of exposure saved up to likely some form of ETF or managed fund. Basically, they're in the stock market, they're exposed to equities. And then one other thing that I've touched on before is I wasn't sure about it until I kind of did my own personal deep dive into what my pension portfolio consisted of. And I noticed, and I don't know if it's different default in terms of the United States to here in Ireland, but it was effectively something like 70% in equities, 15% was on like a real estate tracker, and then the other 10-15% was just a range of other commodities, some gold, some oil, corn, things like this. But one thing that would concern me if there is a scenario where there is a seismic market crash would be that pensions could in theory be decimated if people are fully exposed to equities without even necessarily knowing that is the case, because a lot of people kind of just know that their funds are being managed for them and they're not necessarily taking an active view in what it is that's comprised of. And then I suppose, what's the most basic way of the ordinary person getting involved in bonds, and what are your expectations then in terms of, say, for 2021? Like, why is it that you're kind of buoyant on the likelihood of bonds performing well?
Yeah, so let's talk about pension funds real quick. Here in the United States, you typically will see a 60% equity, 40% bond mix. Now, there are cases where they'll mix in commodities and other stuff, but generally you get a stock bond ratio. The challenge is I do believe the equity markets, global equity market, will come down significantly. Now, normally you'd have the bond allocation as your hedge. The problem is what bonds you have in your portfolio. And in this case, if you look at a lot of pensions, they have very little treasuries, which are your true hedge against the meltdown, because they're chasing return. And you see that from the sounds of your pension, is that if I were a pensionee, I would perceive that, hey, this is safe, I don't have to worry about it. Well, I might have to worry about it if the pension loses half its money and doesn't recover by the time I retire, because that means my guarantee of income might get changed somehow. Maybe not, but somebody's is down the road. So as far as what I see playing out in the bond market, which I'm frankly surprised, I expected it to play out last year, is I expect bond prices in the US across the curve to get to zero. And depending on where you are at on the curve on that, I mean, the returns could be 30, 40, 50% if you're on the long end of the curve. In the middle, you could be easily see 10 or 20, and the short end is so short that there's no meat on that bone to chase. But there is substantial upside, because bond prices, treasury bond prices rise inversely to yield. So if yields are falling, bond prices rise, and there's a pretty substantial move there. The real advantage isn't just from a hedging perspective, which is what you would use it as, in your portfolio. The other advantage is to give you dry powder at the bottom, because that's where really most people go wrong. So, someone's 100% equity exposure right now. Finally, this whole thing, across the world breaks. Let's say equity prices drop 50%, maybe more, who knows? But let's just say they drop, cut in half. Well, that's where you want to buy. But if you have all of your money in that, where's your dry powder? Well, that's where treasuries come in. Why? Because they've gone up in value. So you liquidate them, and after they've gone up, to buy more stocks. That's how people make money long term. It is not taking too much risk at the top, but being wise enough to realize that, hey, there's a point where things are way overvalued. And even if I want to take more risk, that I do need to build in some protection, because I need that opportunity to buy at the bottom. Now, does that mean you should go in all treasuries? And not necessarily. It just means you should consider hedging your position. And that's hard for people to do, because they're saying, well, the market just keeps going up, so I'll just stay in it longer and longer and longer until it's too late. But the real key is making sure you have cash to buy when things are cheap, and very few people do. Then that's why you see most investors, whether in equity investors or they're just in their own retirement plan or in real estate, you always hear them talking about, like, oh man, I missed out on that bottom, and I missed on that bottom, and I missed on this other bottom. Why? Because they had no money.
Yeah.
And if you have money, you can at least buy something low. Maybe you can't buy a lot, but at least you could buy something. And I think that's what most investors really miss.
Yeah, I suppose it's all about that old adage of the concept of margin of safety. I think it was Benjamin Graham, the Warren Buffett's mentor, just thought, because there's so many people, especially now, say, for example, getting involved in cryptocurrency markets. And if you even look at the charts right now, things are so kind of short-term euphoric. Now, again, as you alluded to before, things could continue going up short-term, and more medium to long-term, they probably are a good investment. But there is just zero margin of safety in that short-term, because things have gone up so exponentially in under 12 months that it becomes gambling after a certain stage, and it's no longer investing whenever you're kind of just, it's going up, so I'm going to put it in so things will keep going, in the assumption that things will keep going up. So yeah, no, I get that. And then in terms of one thing that I think is really difficult to try and understand how it's going to play out over the coming years is real estate, housing, just ordinary people, because the primary, I suppose, investment that the ordinary person has is their home. Which it is in effect an investment. And obviously, say you have a 80%, 90% mortgage. A lot of people here, maybe, I'm not sure exactly what the percentage requirements in terms of deposit are in the States, but there's lots of 90% mortgages, 95% mortgages, even where I'm from. And that leads to massive exposure to people. And then I suppose people don't typically realize that very, very small increases in the interest rate could lead to quite substantial increases in monthly repayments if you're on a non-fixed variable rate in time. Now, I suppose in terms of the interest rate, then, do you see a scenario short term or medium term, like we're going to go into negative interest rates, or potentially things will reverse and revert to historic norms, which would be much higher than they are at the moment?
There's no indication that things are going to revert to their historic norms. I mean, given what quantitative easing does, I mean, I can't speak to what's going on in your country, because I don't know the monetary system at all. I do know
it's very similar in terms of the interest rates with yourselves.
Okay, so I understand how quantitative easing works. I understand how it leads to lower interest rates. I understand the liquidity trap and all that stuff. But the problem is when rates collapse and you get a risk off event, well, housing prices crash too. And then people get upside down, because like you said, they got these 95% mortgages here. I'm sure, we have people not even paying on their mortgages, they're delinquent. And so what do? Right? You've lost your job. Maybe your spouse has lost their job. You've got 3 little kids that are hungry, and you've got some money, a little bit of money coming in. And why would you pay on your house? Because you thought it was an investment when it really was just a place to live. And now you're upside down. So why throw good money after bad? And so people end up defaulting, and that only makes it worse, because their feeling is, well, I'll just go rent somewhere because it's cheaper, and then maybe at some point I'll be able to buy back in. But there's no way, because now I'm upside down 100,000, I'm going to keep making this payment at all. And that's exactly what we saw in the great financial crisis. It was an easy decision for a lot of people, and then the government made it even better, because after a few years they allowed them to buy homes again. And now people are levered up again. And of course, this time people say, well, housing isn't going down. Yeah, okay, well, we'll see about that.
So I suppose short term, if there was a normal equity market crash, do you envisage it would be a similar way that it would play out in terms of real estate as well to it did in the GFC?
Yeah, I think, no, I think it'll be worse than the great
Okay.
financial crisis, which is saying a lot, but there's a lot more leverage in the system now.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't fix the problems of the great financial crisis, which was we had a lot of bad debt.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's two ways you can fix the problem. You can either pay down and get rid of the bad debt and discharge things and write them off in bankruptcy court, and then rebuild with more stringent lending standards where people are not over leveraged. Or you can create another credit bubble and then hope to wallpaper over that bad debt with good debt, which turns out we've actually wallpapered over it with more bad debt, hoping that we have a different outcome. The reality is when you're in a situation where there is a liquidity trap and there isn't that much money floating around, at some point people cannot afford to pay things. And one of those outcomes, as we just talked about, is default. And we're seeing that even now as people are getting stimulus checks and unemployment, they're still not paying rent or not paying full rent or not paying on their mortgage. And the idea is, well, they're going to have to. Well, my view is a lot of them aren't going to be able to. Maybe they'll be able to pay some of it. Probably not going to be able to pay all of it. And you get enough of that going on. Plus, you have people in the pandemic chasing real estate prices higher for reasons that I'm beyond me. Same argument I can't figure out is why people bought cars when they couldn't drive anywhere. It baffled me what people were doing, but I do know people paid a premium price for that. And now the question is that I have is, well, who's going to be able to continue that? When all the people that have chased all these homes down and bought, where's the next line of buyer from? Well, I don't think they exist.
Right. And then I suppose because people are being told that there's going to be this ever increasing inflation, people then assume that inflation will have positive impacts on house values and things like this. I know that you have different thoughts in terms of inflation to many, well, I won't say experts, but many people that are just automatically assuming that there's going to be inflation to come in the short term. Inflation, deflation, where do you see us heading at the moment?
Well, I'm very strongly in the minority in the deflation camp, because a lot of people think that quantitative easing and stimulus is money printing, which neither is. There is no money printing. Stimulus checks are borrowed, so that means that the government has to pay that back. So they're not creating brand new money. People see it showing up in what we call the money supply, which is checkable deposits, savings accounts, time deposits, and brokers' money market funds. But that's just because it's being borrowed from a non-M2 source. I mean, if I borrow money from you, Luke, which would not show up in our M2, and I deposit in my bank account, well, that would look like there's money printing. Wasn't there before? Here it is now. Where did it come from? Well, it came from a non-M2 source. And quantitative easing is just a reserve swap. And all the Fed is doing there is taking, say, we'll take a 2-year treasury note that a bank is holding in reserve, and they're swapping it with an overnight reserve. And for some reason, people think that's money printing too, but it's not. In fact, the whole purpose of quantitative easing is to reduce the supply of dollars or lock them into the banking system and reduce the supply of treasury security. And the point of that is to make the dollar go up and make interest rates go down. Well, why is that? Well, you want a stronger dollar because Americans, at least in the cycle of how we do global commerce, our role is, as the largest consuming nation in the world, is to buy other people's stuff. Mm-hmm. So what makes me want to buy stuff from you, Luke? Well, it would mean that my currency needs to be stronger than yours, because if it was the opposite, then I would just buy it domestically. There would be no incentive for me to buy it from you. And you want that too. You say, hey, I want the dollar to be relatively strong to the rest of the world's currency, so Americans will go out and consume. Well, the other way that helps that is if interest rates are low, right? Because then, hey, I don't have a lot of money right now, but I think I'm going to get a raise down the road. So what I'll do is I'll borrow money and spend it abroad. And what that does is it creates dollars inside the banking system out of thin air, because that's how dollars are created, is by lending. And then it spends them out into the global economy where they move around, and then the cycle gets going. And that's how you actually create inflation. You don't create inflation by borrowing money and giving it to people. And we have Japan as a poster child of evidence of that. Europe is proof of that. And here, even in the United States, I mean, we have, the Trump tax cuts were an inadvertent way of giving people money. That didn't lead to inflation. We had the stimulus, the COVID stimulus, which didn't lead to inflation. We just had a stimulus in December, which has not led to inflation. And now but the next one, because it's bigger than the last, well, that one will surely have to lead to inflation. But the reality is that's not how you create inflation. You create inflation when people borrow and you spend that money out in the global economy and you get it moving around. It's just not moving. The other problem is, if you really understand how quantitative easing works, you realize that it leads to trapping money inside the banking system in what I refer to, or what is referred to as a liquidity trap. Well, money is stuck inside the banking system that everyone looks and says, look at all that money in the banking system, look at all that money in deposits. When that comes out, why is it not coming out? Because it's locked down. Well, when that happens, the velocity of money, or how many times money is used to buy a good or service, well, it slows down. Well, when velocity of money is low and it's nearly at its all-time low, which we saw during the COVID lockdowns here, well, you don't get inflation either, because it's another way to get inflation, right? So if money's not being created in the banking system, but I go to you, Luke, and spend some money, and then you go to the next person, spend some money, and that money is moving around a lot, well, you get inflation. But if money's not moving, you don't get inflation. Now, where you get inflation is the fact that everyone believes that all these things are going to be inflationary. And so what they've done is they have gone in and shorted treasury bonds on the long end of the curve up. They've gone long on commodities such as oil and copper and other things, because their answer is, well, there's going to be inflation, so I'm going to get ahead of the trend. Well, the problem is you can front run a trend, but there better be someone after you to buy it. So in this case, if you're front running oil, then what you're expecting is there'd be a demand for products from consumers who are going to drive and fly and do other things. But what if that demand doesn't show up because they don't have the money, or they can't afford those higher prices? Well, then you figure out who the bag holder really is when the music stops.
When the music stops, yeah. So when the music stops, I suppose, one of the most challenging things is trying to work out, I suppose, exactly what way it will play out. In terms of, do you see it being a kind of roller coaster type scenario where there are lots of, because the sad thing, I suppose, with people developing this buy the dip mentality based on how things have gone have quickly rebounded, throughout the last few bottoms that we've had. Do you think people that try and do that are going to get burnt? This time, say things go down by 30% in a month, overnight, there's some sort of black swan event, then people will probably put what money they have on the sidelines right now back into the market, and then things will just trundle on lower. And then do you have any sort of mind map in terms of what way this will play out once the top hits and things start going down?
Yeah, historically there's a pretty good map for that. I mean, you get a big move up, you get a collapse down. Everyone thinks that this is and I really like the crypto cloud, because you'll hear them say, you hear people tweet about, hey, you missed out on this price and it's back here, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole idea is you wanted to buy and here it is again, don't miss out. Well, that's what people will perceive. They'll see this big move down, They'll buy it, it'll go up, and they'll say like, aha, I knew it. And then it'll roll over and boom. And then that's when just the annihilation happens. The challenge for me this time, Luke, is there's so much speculation in this market compared to almost any market in history, that there could be a huge move down and then a huge move back as other money comes back in, because a lot of institutional money managers didn't chase the March bottom, because if you've been in this business long enough, you kind of learn what things are not smart to chase, even though sometimes you look back and like, man, that would have been really the way to buy. But buying in the middle of equities in the middle of a pandemic when there's a recession going on usually isn't the recipe for long-term success. It turned out that that's what people should have done. So I think what you'll see is a move down. You'll see institutional money come back because they'll feel like, hey, I missed the last one, I want to get on this one. Then retail will pop in at somewhere along the line when they scrape together some more money after getting slaughtered, and then you'll see it roll over as we normally do. But or maybe things just shatter apart. I mean, there's literally so much leverage under here. I mean, it could be like nitroglycerin, and it could just explode. I mean, it can go either way. I mean, we're in a very unusual market. I've never seen anything like this, not even in history. So I don't know, but that's why I'm not out there gambling with my money and hoping that it's just going to keep going up forever.
Yeah, no, totally. And yeah, I suppose, like, how do we get to this situation in the sense that this sort of Keynesian approach to economics, that those at the helm effectively just think that pulling these monetary policy, fiscal policy levers in perpetuity is the answer, and it's the only answer, as opposed to kind of allowing. Because I remember reading, I think it was one of the first books from Peter Schiff that I read. It came out in about 2014. I think it was called The Real Crash. He talked about how, in pure free markets, what you need to do as soon as there is a bubble, you need to let it kind of completely deflate or pop. And what he described, I think, in the scenario was in the dot-com bubble, instead of allowing it to pop, it was reinflated by this housing market bubble, which became the GFC. And then through the bailouts and things like this, as opposed to letting it pop, it was then the government bubble that has now become this kind of king of all bubbles, let's say. So I suppose, why do you think it is that people have kind of moved so much in this direction, in terms of just following Keynesian kind of approach to economics in the last few decades? And then following on from that, like, where do you think, like, do you see a path that we can take following this, that, where do you think we should head, that's a more sound way of governing our kind of financial systems?
Well, yeah, I think the question is why do we keep playing this game, is because it seems to work, right? I mean, okay, the dot-com bubble blew, but we fixed it with the housing bubble. That blew, so we fixed it with, what appears to be the everything bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, central bankers, if you really listen to what they say, they actually really believe that they can influence the economy and they can make things work the way they want it to. The problem is they inadvertently create bubbles. And then when you create a bubble, your only solution is to perpetuate it. And the problem is you need an exponential more amount of money. And if you can't create that because central banks can't print money, well, now you have a problem. And eventually that bubble pops and they don't have the tools or mechanisms to stop it. And so, if you look at a central bank, they really functionally, at least here in the United States, and this will mirror a lot of other ones to some degree, is the Fed really they have two policy tools, but they both do the same thing. They can either raise rates or lower rates. So what's their choice? Okay, so let's go ahead and raise rates. Well, that will crash the economy, impoverish a lot of people. Now, in the end, popping the bubble will be a benefit because we can clear out all the excess. Do you really want to tell that to all the baby boomers who just have all their net worth wiped out, their houses, their 401ks, their IRAs, and all that, pensions? Nope, you sure don't want to be the person that tells them that. So what do? You turn the lever and say, well, we'll just go to lower interest rates because, well, that will probably work. And the challenge is when you really get into, that 2 a.m. where you wake up in the morning earlier than you want to because you went to bed thinking about this, you realize that the only way to perpetuate the bubble is to perpetually lower interest rates. Even in the negative territory, you can never stop because you have to continuously create an exponential more amount of money to keep the bubble up. But the problem is at some point, there's never enough money to keep the bubble up and it pops. And this bubble will pop too. The only thing that's kept it really going is the amount of speculation that people are willing to take, through futures contracts or option contracts, which is mind-boggling to me that you would ever expect to see the U.S. stock market being a derivative of the options market. I mean, if you had told someone that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, they would have laughed at you. But here it is today that the options market is literally driving the equity market, which that's why when you said earlier, do you think it could go down, say 30%? The scary part is when all of this leverage pops, it could really just crash hard. And it doesn't mean it couldn't bounce and then crash again. But when this leverage comes out, it's going to be nasty. Now, your second question of do I see us ever moving more into something more stable, predictable that will benefit all of society and create men and women as equal, and not only in terms across the world where we can all participate in a global monetary system with our own country's monetary systems. Yeah, that's not going to happen. You know,
I had to ask, like I had to ask.
I'll tell you why. And so the game of Keynesian economics, which was really started, was started before that. I mean, we've adopted the name because Maynard Keynes really did a lot of research and more work and kind of formalize it. Is when you understand the central banking and what it does, it's designed to impoverish a large number of a population. It's also designed to support a large and expanding government, and it's designed to keep a very small segment of the population very rich. Now, some of your fans are watching the show. It's like, well, think about, where do you live in your country? Are there certain families that, and they don't perpetually stay generationally rich, but have been generationally rich for quite a while before maybe, the third, the great grandkid, blows all the money, doing something stupid. Well, that's because a monetary system is designed to keep them rich, and is designed, if you're not rich, to keep you from becoming rich. Now, certain people do eventually, break through. You'll have people like a Mark Zuckerberg who will invent Facebook and become rich. Does that mean he will be able to stay generationally rich? No, but he has a chance to. Whereas the rest of us, for us to go from middle class or poor up the ladder, it's very, very difficult because the system wasn't designed for that. It was designed to get us to take on more debt because, Luke's my neighbor and he just pulls up in this really cool new car, and I can't be seen driving my old car next to his new car because I want everyone to know I'm as successful or more successful than him. So I go out and I finance a car too. And then he buys a new stereo and is shaking my walls, and I want to show him that I can really do better than that. So we have this game of one-upmanship. I have to always, borrow money to, be something I'm not. And by borrowing money, I'm effectively, enslaving myself to the system because I have to work to pay my debt. Well, that's the brilliance of the system. If you get a large number of people in debt, they'll work, because what happens if they don't work? You take their stuff away. What do people really, really hate? You don't like it when you take their stuff away. And that's what a debt-based economy does. It impoverishes a large amount of people. Now, they don't perceive that because they might say, well, hey, I'm middle class. I have a really nice home, really drive a nice car. Well, good. How much debt do you have? Can you quit working? And the answer for a lot of people is no. And so do I ever think this system will change? No, I think if it falls and breaks down, we'll have a new version of it because we'll learn what we did wrong and we'll come out with it, because the people in power and governments do not want to be, they want the people to perceive that they're in control, but in reality, they don't want to do that. The monetary system is the tool that they use. And so no, I sadly to say, I don't think it'll change.
Yeah. I think probably the most challenging thing, which was one thing we haven't mentioned, that really makes things more difficult for more people to kind of move up is the system of taxation. Just the way in which income tax probably is like the heaviest burden proportion, in terms of a percentage basis. Whereas now, and this is why, I find it fascinating to read reading about Henry George at the moment, his proposal for land tax. I think it would be something, right now where there's so many like really wealthy people starting to gobble up all the agricultural land and things like this, that could be a way of really putting a check on people almost tyrannically taking over too much of natural resources, if you know what I mean. But yeah, like in the world that we live in at the moment, so many countries are willing to allow different corporations to come in and not pay tax or pay very little tax, whereas the ordinary working person may be paying 20, 30, 40, 50% plus in different countries, So I think that actually focusing on the tax system and some sort of ordinary average Jane and Joe revolution in terms of real wholesale changes of the tax system would probably be the one way in which you could have a scenario where more people had a bigger slice of the pie, let's say, rather than few having the whole thing.
Except they're not going to do that.
No.
And so that's so how do you break the mold, right? I mean, that's what's cool about macro. My family broke the mold inadvertently. My dad did not realize when the advice he got when he was young literally changed our family's financial future. And at the time, if you would have told him, he would not have known. He didn't. It wasn't until many years later that it became very apparent that he had changed the game. And that's what people don't realize is so if you ever thought, Luke, why do people buy homes at the peak? Why do they buy stocks at the peak? Why do they do all these things at the peak? Because when they have the most money. And what's the hardest thing to do? When everybody you know is either getting rich or buying a bunch of stuff and doing all this fancy vacations and things that they do at market peaks and bubble peaks, is to do the exact opposite, is to save money and say, you know what, I'm going to wait this out. Oh, you're an idiot. You're missing out. You're going to pay triple what I just paid for this house. And there's that pressure, God, the homes are going to go away or stocks are going to keep going up. But the way you change the game is by not playing it. Mm-hmm. And getting counter to the cycle that everyone else is. Because if you get in a point where, hey, I'm in a cycle where, I bought a house and I'm going to need another one. Maybe my family's growing, and then you're willing to wait until the cycle is low again and buy, or I'm going to do most of my buying of stocks at the bottom. You can change your financial future, but it's so difficult to do. It's so difficult to do, and that's one thing I learned from my dad is as I grew up and I understood more and more what he inadvertently did not intend to do, but did, and how it changed our family. I realized, like, okay, I can do that too in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I've been successful with that. And in fact, if you look at, financially, I was debt free at 38, house paid off. Totally debt free at 38. How many people get to say that? That was my 38th birthday gift to myself. I paid off the house. Because I got out of that cycle, and I look at this cycle now, and a lot of people laugh like, "Oh, you're bond, you're the bond king. What an idiot!" And I keep saying it. In the end, I'm going to win. And a lot of people they're not even old enough to understand that, because I understand the cycles. And in the end means I'm going to have more money to buy risk assets than I do now, and I'm going to buy them from all the people that don't realize is the reason prices go down so quickly in bear markets is because everyone's selling at the same time. That's the opposite of why they're going up. Everyone buys, chase them up, but wait till everyone has to sell to get out and there's no buyers. Well, that's where I'll be waiting somewhere as prices are collapsing. I'm like, oh, okay, now I'll start buying up, because I realize that's how you break the cycle. And once you figure that out, well, you can change not only your family's life, but perhaps your children and their children, by teaching them, look, stop doing what everyone else is doing, and here's why. And so that's kind of what I inadvertently teach on my show is look, the reason we're doing macro investing is because we're trying to break the mold. Problem is, it's really hard to break the mold in late cycle bubbles, because it can go on longer than some people are willing to stay solvent. But I diligently say I will man the kingdom, and even if there's just one little piece of rock of rubble left of the castle, I'll be there, because when the castle is eventually reborn, well, it'll be glorious. And that's because I've broken the mold for now. It'll be the second time I've done it in my life. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, no, I completely agree in terms of your dad got the advice in the first place and then he passed it on to yourself. So,
no, my dad's motivation was some completely different reason. And like I said, I don't think even he realized at the time. I think he knew he was doing something that other people weren't doing, but I don't think he knew the long-term outcome. In fact, I was talking to him, I think, about it last year, because I did a show where I mentioned what he had done, and he called me because he watches my shows later, and he says, I never really thought about how that changed our life. And he's like, I started to think about, what if I would not have done that? He's like, wow, our lives would be, as a family, completely different. But because of that, what he did financially, it completely changed our family's financial future. Not a night and day difference, and it was totally unintended. He got great advice from someone who understood what to do at the time, and I think he just did it. I don't know how much thought he put in it, but he understood that it was a smart idea, and he did it, and it changed everything.
Kudos to him for taking the initiative to do it. But yeah, it all just comes down to education then, because we're not taught these things in school. So unless you have it kind of being passed on through familial generations, you're not you might learn it at some stage in life, but it may be just a fluke type thing. But that's what's so wonderful, I suppose, about the tool of YouTube and different kind of platforms like this in this day and age, because I can learn from you, you know, or even just, I think Charlie Munger, vice president of Berkshire Hathaway, said, you know, you can make friends with the eminent dead. It's about, you know, reading books and learning from people, great thinkers of the past. So there are ways in which we can do it, but it's just the fact that I think that as much as you were describing that the monetary system is rigged in effect, I think that the educational system is probably worse so, if anything, because, you know, kind of macroeconomics is so important because it literally impacts every single industry, as we've seen more than ever in this last 12 months, and no doubt we'll see in the next 12 months more than ever. So like, it is the sort of thing that everyone should be more aware of, and it's interesting as well. Like, it's interesting because it impacts every element of society. So that's why, I suppose, with my channel, I want to just make sure that no matter what else I'm touching on, I always want to kind of like bring this home as well, because it affects everyone's lives, especially whenever everyone's waiting on a pension at the end of the day, whenever people finish their work and things like this, and then suddenly they've no money in their pension. So
right, or they find out that their pension isn't as much as they need it to be, and you know, they find out that now I know why grandma and grandpa lived kind of a meager life. Well, that's because their pension didn't keep up with inflation. They thought it would. They thought it would provide for them, and they didn't save. And you start looking generationally, and you see these mistakes after mistakes being made. And kind of like you said, is people. It's not so much our educational system is failing. It's because people. It's how they choose to spend their time. You know, I was just interviewed by Tom from Palisade Radio, on Wednesday, and I don't recall if he went to college or not, but he said he was a welder and he was welding for 10 hours a day. Now, when you're welding, you're by yourself. So what did he do? Is he downloaded a bunch of shows and podcasts like yours. And he's like, I listen to them all day long. So he's like, I got my education from some of the smartest people out there that you would never go to school and hear.
Yeah.
And he used that to change his future. So, you know, you think about, what do you put up in here, you know? What kind of, you know, instead of listening to music, maybe listen to an ebook, or download a podcast, or, you know, download a YouTube and convert it into a podcast. You know, what are you doing with your free time?
Yeah.
And how are you educating yourself? What book, like you said, what books are you reading? What are you doing? Because it all comes down to the fact that, you know, humans are very herd mentality. You know, we all follow the same, you know, if enough people are going left, we all go left. I mean, it takes a bold person to look and like, why are we going right? Because you don't want to stand out from the crowd. I mean, we learn that in elementary school, right? I mean, you know, the kids always get picked on. Well, what's the best way not to get picked on? You want to wear the same clothes they are. You want to go to watch the same TV shows, go to the same event. You want to just meld in, and we learn that at a young age. Only the truly bold are willing to look at the system, understand, and say, you know what, I'm not going to play.
Yeah.
If you don't want to play and you want to go the other direction, you might make a lot of mistakes, and you might be in the wrong place at the wrong time sometimes, but there will be a day when you're in the right spot first, because everyone will come hurting over. And that's when, you know, you've changed your future. And, you know, I wish I could encourage more people to do that, but it's so hard. A lot of people know they're afraid to, but they don't think they have the ability to, because they're trapped inside, you know, the 9 to 5 and the pension and doing the things they got to do. But, you know, think of it this way: if you're listening and you have a family, maybe you can't change your future. Maybe it's too far in and you're too deep. But can you change your kids? Can you help them so they don't fall in the same trap that maybe you did, your parents, your parents, and so on and so forth? Maybe you can change that. You know, there are a lot of families that, at least in America, that have immigrated here, and, you know, they didn't have educations, but they worked 2 jobs to make sure the kids went to college. And then you meet the kids who went to college, and you're like, wow, you know, my parents changed my future. I'm working to change my kids' future. So sometimes you can't do it in one time, but maybe over the course of a couple generations you can. And you may not be there to see it, but, you know, what a difference it might be to your family if you could help them realize that, hey, look, the game's rigged against you. You can either try to change it, which is really hard to do, or you can change how you play. That is not as hard to do, but it is still difficult, but it has the biggest reward.
And the show rolls on. I think that's a very profound final message to leave this on. So, Stephen Van Metre, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you taking the time, especially with it's a Friday evening. So, yeah, thanks a lot. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again sometime after the Bond King has successfully held siege and led his empire to victory.
Right on, Luke. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I will absolutely look forward to coming back again in the future.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. See you, Steve.
All right, bye.
Well, thanks again to Steve Van Metre. Really informative, challenging information there. For more authentic conversations and challenging information, you can subscribe to Narrow Path Man with myself, Luke McCann, here on YouTube, and also now available on all podcast networks as well. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll link Steve's account to the link in the description below, and I'll also put on the little video that pops up here. So there's one that says subscribe, and there's one that says here's a video of Steve's. Do both. Much love. God bless. Keep the faith.